Now, Glooscap is a character who looks like this. This is his face. This is his nose. This is his mouth. And these are the feathers in his headdress. And this is Glooscap. And Glooscap lived with Grandma Woodchuck. This is Grandma Woodchuck. And a woodchuck is a little kind of animal like a groundhog that lives in America, in the Americas. This is Grandma Woodchuck. And they lived in a lodge, which is a little house, by the side of the big water. Now, if you see a shadow that you can do or that you want to practice during the story, join in with me. I can see Maya doing the water there, which is wonderful. Now, one day, Glooscap was walking by the side of the big water when he saw something on the water. It was a duck. Lots of ducks. Quack, 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 quack. And Glooscap said, "It's time to go hunting." And Glooscap got into his canoe and he rowed out onto the big water, rowing like this. Who can do rowing like this? Rowing like this with one paddle. And as Glooscap rowed, of course he sang a rowing song, and it went like this. Ki-o-wa-ji-ne, yo-ho-hoo-hee-ho. Ki-o-wa-ji-ne, ki-o-wa-ji-ne. Ki-o-wa-ji-ne, yo-ho-hoo-hee. Ki-o-wa-ji-ne, ki-o-wa-ji-ne. But the wind was so strong, it blew Glooscap's canoe all the way back to land. So we had to row even harder and sing even faster. Ready? Ki-o-wa-ji-ne, yo-ho-hoo-hee-hoo. Ki-o-wa-ji-ne, ki-o-wa-ji-ne. Ki-o-wa-ji-ne, yo-ho-hoo-hee. Ki-o-wa-ji-ne, ki-o-wa-ji-ne. But the wind was so strong, it blew the canoe back to land again. 4 times Glooscap tried to row out into the big water, ki-o-wa-ji-ne, ki-o-wa-ji-ne, until he was completely out of breath. So he went back to the lodge, and he went inside, and he said to Grandmother Woodchuck, "Where does the wind come from?" And Grandmother Woodchuck said, "It comes from a big mountain. On the big mountain, there is a big eagle called Wunschausen. And Wunschausen flaps his wings and makes the winds blow." And then Glooscap said to Grandmother Woodchuck, "And how do I find this Wunschausen?" And Grandmother Woodchuck said, "You have to walk facing the wind." So Glooscap left the lodge and he walked facing the wind. He walked over the fields, through the forests, down the valleys, up the hills, until he came to the mountain slopes, and he began climbing the mountain. But as he climbed, grabbing onto boulders, the wind got stronger and stronger. And Glooscap walked and climbed, and the wind was so strong, it blew away his feathers. Then the wind was so strong, it blew away all his clothes. Then the wind was so strong, it blew away his hair. Then the wind was so strong, it blew away his nose. And eventually Glooscap got to the top of the mountain, and there was Wunschausen the eagle, flapping his wings and making the wind blow. And Glooscap clung onto a rock. Now he had no hair and no nose, and he said, "Grandfather, Grandfather, Grandfather! And Wachowsen the eagle stopped flapping his wings and looked and said, "Who's calling?" And Glooscap said, "It's me. Ah, you do a good job of making the wind blow, but if you were on another mountain peak, you'd do an even better job, and I know how to take you there." And the eagle thought, "I would like to make even more wind, so I would like to go to this other mountaintop." And he said, "Yes, take me to the other mountaintop." So Glooscap got a strap, a thing for carrying things, a bit like a belt. And he said to the eagle, "I'll carry you in this belt to the other mountain." So the eagle closed his wings, and Glooscap tied the strap around the eagle's wings so the eagle's wings couldn't flap. Then Glooscap took the eagle and he dropped the eagle into a crack in the rock, upside down, so the eagle couldn't flap its wings and just his feet were sticking out. Then Glooscap went back down the mountain, over the hills, through the valleys, through the forest, over the fields, and as he did so, do you know what happened? First of all, his nose grew back, and then his hair grew back, and he went to his lodge, and he got some new clothes and some new feathers, and then he said, "Now it is time to go hunting." And he went down to the side of the big water, and he got in his canoe, and he went out rowing. But it was hot, and the air was still, and the water was still, and the water was dirty, and the water was smelly, and it was hard to paddle in the heat because Glooscap could hardly breathe. And so when he paddled and sang his song this time, he sang, "Kiowa jine, yoho, iho, Kiowa jine, Kiowa jine, Kiowa jine, yoho, Kiowa jine, Kiowa jine." And he couldn't row, so he went back to the lodge and he said to Grandmother Woodchuck, "What has happened?" And Grandmother Woodchuck said, for she was a very wise woodchuck, she said to Glooscap, "What have you done?" And Glooscap told Grandmother Woodchuck that he'd gone up the mountain and he put a strap around Wachowsen and dropped Wachowsen into a crack so there would be no wind and he could go hunting the ducks with his bow and arrow. And Grandmother Woodchuck said, "Oh, Glooscap, the wind is very important. We need the wind to keep the air moving, to keep it cool. We need the wind to keep the water moving, to keep it fresh and clean and sweet. We need the wind to bring the clouds, to give us rain. The wind is very important." So Glooscap, with his feathers and his nose and his hair, went back over the fields, through the forest, through the valleys, over the hills, up the mountain, to the place where he had left Wachowsen the eagle with his feet sticking out of the ground. And Glooscap said to the eagle, "Uncle, Uncle, what are you doing in there?" And the eagle from inside the crack said, "Oh, this very ugly thing with no nose and no hair and no eyebrows came and called me grandfather and said I could make better wind from another mountain top. Then he tied me up in a strap and dropped me in this hole." And Glooscap said, "That's terrible, grandfather. I mean, uncle. I will help you." And Glooscap pulled Wachowsen out of the crack in the rock and took Wachowsen back to his mountain peak and untied the straps so Wachowsen could flap his wings once more. And Wachowsen was very grateful. But Glooscap said to Wachowson the eagle, "Uncle, it is a good job you do blowing the wind, but sometimes it is good when there is wind, and sometimes it is good when there is no wind." And Wachowson the eagle said, "I hear you." And from that day onwards, sometimes there is wind blowing, sometimes it is very strong wind, sometimes it is very little wind, and sometimes there is no wind. And that's why, because of Glooscap and the wind eagle Wachowson. And that's the end of the story.